Welcome back to my channel! Hey guys, it's Caroline and today I'm going to be talking about how to rent an apartment in Italy. So I was a student in Florence. My first year I rented an apartment and my school actually found an apartment for me. If you're studying abroad, I would definitely advise against renting an apartment through your university because most likely the apartment will cost much more than what you would pay if you actually find an apartment yourself, since the university has kind of a base price for everyone, and just because you're paying a certain amount doesn't mean that's what the university is paying for it. So definitely be careful with that. Unless you know for a fact that your university has really great housing. Mine unfortunately kind of fluctuated, so some of my friends had amazing apartments and then some of us had less amazing apartments, so I would just err on the side of caution with getting university housing based on my personal experience. So the very first thing I think you should avoid renting through apartment agencies, which seems kind of bizarre because that's where you would think you should go to rent an apartment. But I had an awful experience with every apartment agency that I used. I actually had 3 different agencies I used. This was all while I was studying in Florence, so I ended up having 4 different apartments during my time in Florence because every single one was a disaster until the last one, which is why I'm here to share with you how you can get to number 4 without going through all the hassle that I went through. I could honestly film a whole entire video about how awful the apartment agencies were in Florence that I used, but to sum it up, basically they would never respond to phone calls or emails if we had troubles with the apartment. Even if we went to the agency in person, it would take hours to accomplish anything, or they would promise to fix something in the apartment and then it would just never happen, even if we continued to call. And when we went to the offices in person, the staff were extremely rude and just treated us kind of like we didn't matter at all, and they knew that we had to pay them either way, so they didn't really care how bad their service was. And they didn't have any place where we could write reviews or, you know, let other people know about how awful this agency was. So they knew they were safe even if they gave us an awful service as an agency. So you might be wondering, okay, I can't use university housing and I can't use an agency, so what do I use? Well, I used Airbnb. I know a lot of people think, oh, Airbnb is not for like short stays on vacation, you know, for 2 or 3 days, but actually Airbnb does long stays as well. And if you type in your dates, like let's say you're staying 4 months somewhere, usually the price you see on Airbnb is gonna be super high, and so I think that scares a lot of people off. But what most people don't know is that if you contact the host directly and say, hey, look, I'm interested in renting your apartment, I'll be in Italy for this amount of time and I'm with this amount of people, the host will actually give you a much lower price for having that long stay. So the price that's calculated on Airbnb is the price that's used typically per night for guests staying a few days, but if you're staying a few months, the price is much lower. So always make sure to contact the host. Some hosts will say, I'm sorry, we don't do long stays, but I'd say like 90% of the hosts that I contacted were totally up for it, and they would let us go see the apartments beforehand, which was super nice. So the main reasons I loved booking through Airbnb were, first of all, I had Airbnb's customer service line to call if there was ever an issue, so I never felt completely alone. I knew that I had kind of the umbrella of Airbnb over my whole rental contract, and if there was ever like an extreme issue, I knew Airbnb would be there to help me resolve it. So I always kind of had that security blanket. Renting through Airbnb also meant that we had someone to clean our house for us every couple of weeks. So the owner we were renting from had actually already hired a cleaning lady for the majority of the year, and she couldn't just go unemployed. So the owners told us, you know, every week or 2, this lady's gonna come and she'll change your sheets for you and clean up your house a little bit. That was something super unexpected, and it ended up being so nice to have that service. The next thing is all of like your utilities, such as lights and water and things like that, are included. Usually if you rent an apartment, that's something you pay separately. So that just creates much less of a hassle. You don't have to worry about paying your monthly bills for that, and everything is just already there, part of the total price on Airbnb. I also really appreciated that Wi-Fi was already in the apartment. In all my other apartments, I had to find my own Wi-Fi, and it was such a hassle and also an extra payment. I loved renting through Airbnb because the owner knew that I would be leaving a review at the end of my stay. So they made sure I was super happy, and if anything was ever broken, they almost came immediately to fix it. They had perfect communication with us. We never had trouble contacting them or reaching them. We honestly never had a major issue that wasn't resolved within a couple days. And by major issues, I mean things like a clogged drain. Of course, course, reading other people's reviews about the apartment and their stays there was absolutely amazing, which is something I could never do with previous apartments, and that's another reason why I just had terrible luck. One other thing that I really loved is that they provided linens and towels for us, and they changed out our towels to give us fresh ones every week or two. And before, I always had to wash my own towels, which I'm fine doing, but again, it was just a nice little perk to have that. And the entire apartment was furnished, the kitchen was stocked and everything. In my previous apartments, they might have given us a few basic dishes and things like that, but they never had a fully stocked kitchen for us, like pans and pots and everything you would need to cook. And then the position was just amazing. A lot of apartments on Airbnb are central, and it's very easy to pinpoint the area you want to stay in on Airbnb. So some of you might wonder how much I paid for my apartment in Florence, and I'm not afraid to say that. Honestly, I think it's completely normal to share that kind of information, and I was a student at the time, so I wasn't paying an extremely insane amount. The amount I paid is actually very good for Florence, especially being in the city center. My apartment was in Santo Spirito, which is a famous piazza just off of the Arno River, and it was like 15 minutes from all of my classes. So, I have my statistics here. My rental period was from February 3rd, 2016 until May 30th, 2017. So that's about 4 months total. The total cost was 7,021 euros, but I had a roommate, so I paid 3,500 euros myself. And the apartment actually could have held up to 4 people. I just happened to have 1 roommate. But if I did have 2 other roommates, I would have been paying a quarter of that cost. So it's even cheaper than 3,500. But 3,500 is already really good. Before that, I was paying around 5,000 per semester, which is crazy to think about now. But we thought at the time that was a good deal until I found this apartment on Airbnb, and I was like, what? How have I been paying so much until now? Airbnb is technically the agency you're using, and they only take a certain amount from your total amount that you pay, and most of the commission comes from the host. So the host is paying the commission because Airbnb is their platform they're using to rent. So I really didn't have to pay much to Airbnb. There was a small service fee, but having an apartment agency, they charge a much higher fee to use them to rent an apartment. And so that was just another cost that I had to pay on top of my rental in the past. So all of those little costs I had renting privately through an apartment agency just kind of went away once I found Airbnb, because everything is already included in the total price and there won't ever be any surprise charges. What you see is what you pay. I'll actually put a link in the description of my apartment, since you might want to see kind of what it was like, what the space looked like, how big it was. It had a view of Santo Spirito Church, which was incredible. It was so pretty to watch the sunset over the church every night and to hear the church bells during the day. I just loved that apartment. I loved everything about it, and everything inside of the apartment was super high quality. So previously all of the apartments I rented were like falling apart because they knew they would be renting to students, but this apartment was super nice. It just felt like a home. It felt like a real house and not some like temporary little bungalow. I hate to say that, but oh my gosh, my previous apartments were so bad. My apartment in Santo Spirito also had heating and air conditioning, and air conditioning is something I never had in any of my apartments beforehand. So having it in that apartment was like a total luxury. And most apartments on Airbnb do have air conditioning because that's what tourists are looking for. It's a very common service that people provide now for guests. I learned so much renting apartments in Italy, and I was so excited to finally be able to share with you guys. I would encourage you to follow in my footsteps and rent online through some sort of vacation rental platform. I'm an American girl living in Italy, and I'm here to share all things Italy with you and a little in between. I will see you guys next time. Ciao for now.